Okay, this is lesson number 62 and it is macro objectives and conflicts within an economic policy. Broadly speaking, it's actually very difficult to ever get a situation where you can improve everything within the economy without something else getting worse off. So a key things in A2 economics, even AS economics, is to say, well, we could do this, however, there's a problem with doing this, and that's going to get you pretty good evaluation. Even better if you can say, well, the government has tried this, however, this may create a problem down the line. Now, what I've done in this particular lesson here is I've looked at a number of different policies and shown you the consequences of those particular objectives in a positive and a negative way. So this session is looking at macro objectives, why they're important. I think you all know what they are now: economic growth, full employment, balance of payments, equilibrium, and price stability. But why are they also important? Well, the first one, economic growth, the reason why that is important is simply because we get economic growth. The primary reason, particularly right now, is we're going to get more taxation returns coming into the economy, and that will help to pay off the national debt. It also means there'll be more confidence, so there perhaps maybe more foreign direct investment. Firms will invest more money anyway. That will kick off the multiplying accelerator. If you do get growth, then it's more likely that you'll be able to invest money into new technologies, into green technologies, innovate. That then will shift out the long run aggregate supply curve, which is independent of supply side policy, because it's just firms investing in new techniques. Okay, so that's economic growth. The reason why we want price stability is it produces more confidence in an economy. If we can keep price stability, if we can keep inflation low at 2%, that means that the the Monetary Policy Committee can have lower interest rates. It also means, of course, if your inflation rate is lower than, say, Germany's, then your exports will become more competitive over time. So having lower inflation than your competitors will therefore help your balance of payments. But broadly speaking, price stability breeds confidence. If you do get high inflation, people know that interest rates are going to rise, number one. There are consequences of that, and therefore that breeds less confidence. If you get hyperinflation, that will destroy your confidence, because there is no point in saving. People who are in debt will be able to pay all of their debts off and everything like this. So you always want price stability. However, there's a slight caveat to that right now, is because in the past, in 2011, we had an inflation rate of 5%. Now, there is one good thing about inflation is, particularly from the government's point of view, is that if you have lots of debts, then those debts become worth less. We always want full employment, obviously, because every time someone's unemployed, the government has to pay out benefits. That means the government will spend more money. The government will lose taxation revenue on that person who's unemployed. It would also lead to a fall in AD. The more people are unemployed, the less they'll be able to spend. Also, on top of that, there are also social costs of unemployment, more likely to commit crime, dysfunctional families, negative externalities will all occur because of that. And finally, probably the least important objective from the government's point of view, although I think is really important, and the government is trying to do something about it, is the balance of payments equilibrium. Now, in the UK economy, we've had a trade deficit now for 30 years. So for the last 30 years, every year's been trade deficit, apart from 1 year, which was 1997. So what the government is trying to do now is to reduce the exchange rate, to rebalance the economy towards exports. But that has a conflict, which I'm going to talk about now, which is cost push inflation. Okay, so let's look at conflicts in terms of economic policy. The first one in here, if we increase AD from here to here, that's really good because we get economic growth. Then from here to here, there starts to be a trade-off between the two policies, and as we go up all the way up here, we're just going to end up with demand pull inflation. So as soon as we get a positive output gap, then we're going to get inflation. So increasing AD, conflict there, we may eventually get inflation. Of course we may not, because our supply side may be so good that the AS curve shoots out, and then if we extend this AD curve here, we do not have inflation. So you can grow aggregate demand in line with aggregate supply, achieving a zero output gap. Another consequence, particularly in the UK, because we have a high marginal propensity to import in the UK, and in 2013 the UK had a record trade deficit of 5% of GDP, is as we spend more money, which is good because we'll get more growth, the trade deficit is going to get worse and worse and worse. Now, this was particularly true, wasn't it, between 1997 and 2007. During that period of time we had economic growth, but also at the same time we were importing more and more goods. So increasing AD, conflict, more imports, and also perhaps more inflation. Okay, this is a policy we're following right now, low interest rates of 0.5%. That could also obviously lead to demand pull inflation, but that will also lead to a lower exchange rate. Now, a low exchange rate is fundamentally good for the UK economy. Some people argue against it for the various reasons I'm going to mention in a second or two, but it will lead to more aggregate demand because we'll sell more exports because they're now cheaper. It will lead to more jobs. It will improve the balance of payments because exports are cheaper, so therefore we will sell more goods. However, it will also lead to cost push inflation. And if you get inflation, then you get other problems as well. It may also lead to demand pull inflation. So there are negative consequences of having a low exchange rate policy. However, really with supply side economics, there's really no conflict at all. Apart from the fact that if you're paying low welfare benefits, then that creates an unfair distribution of income. If you lower taxes, we have a progressive tax system in the UK, but if you lower taxes, then that will make the rich even richer. And if we increase VAT, say, which is what we have done, that is a regressive tax. It brings in lots of income, £10 billion a year. However, it makes the poor poorer because they spend a greater proportion of their income on that tax. We've also used quantitative easing, which is really printing money. And that may also lead to more inflation because the more money that we print, perhaps that may lead to higher inflation. However, it's also increased confidence, and it's probably saved the banking system, and we probably agree that it's added 2% to economic growth every year. So as a policy, it's been pretty successful out of nothing. However, it does build up dangers for the future. In effect, there's too much money going around the world. If we increase AD, if we have a high economic growth, that's going to hit the environment because we're going to use up more and more resources. So that's a negative consequence of that. And finally, at this moment in time, a big one is we're trying to stimulate the economy, we're trying to get demand going, we're trying to get consumption going, or the government is. So actually we're trying to increase house prices as well. House prices are really good if they go up because that will actually make the banking system safer because they lend out a lot of money in terms of the housing market. However, if the housing market increases too rapidly, then we spend too much money, then imports are going to get worse, we might get demand pull inflation, and we might be sowing the seeds of another credit crunch. And also, obviously, if we try and improve the economy by increasing G, the national debt in the short term may get worse. Okay, if we follow a Keynesian analysis, then maybe we may get more money back in the future. So with economics, there is always conflict with all these policies. And a key part of A2 economics is to say, well, we can do this. However, it may not work because let's have a look at the economy. A big question then is it possible to get ideal policies all over throughout the whole economy? With hindsight, we could probably work out, we could look at the period 1997 to 2007. With hindsight, we could probably say, well, if we'd done this, this would have been better. Personally, I always believe it is possible to get policies, to probably get most of the policies correct. And the reason why I say that is because China's been, I don't agree with China's growth, but China's been remarkably successful. If 30 odd years ago you had said that China would achieve a rate of growth of 8% a year, or 9% a year, even 10% a year, every single year for the last 30 odd years, nobody would have believed you. Every economist would have said, no, you can't do that. But you can do it. And the reason why you can do it is because the Chinese save an awful lot of money, and then at the same time they will invest an awful lot of money, which means that the long run supply curve moves outwards. So actually I believe, a bit like Anatol Kalecki, that you can use various policies to really get the economy moving, but then again I'm not empowered to make those decisions. Okay, so this is lesson 62. These are the macro objectives, and with the macro objectives there will always be conflict.